Bruchim Aboim, Shem Yegin Shir Torah, Moses Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. All the men in the main shul, the women upstairs and downstairs, everyone listening in through the phone system, watching through the streaming. Bruchim Aboim. As you've heard and seen, Yegin Shir Torah's dinner is just one day away tomorrow night. All the men are invited to come. In Yisrael Avenue K, East 29th Street, starting at 7 p.m. Prominent Rabbanim will be speaking, and we'll have a special presentation of Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita, the Shas and Shuvas, and Havda Ben Chaim of the Kalev Rebbe Zatzal. Tonight we have the cover to have with us once again Rabbi Yosef Sayagh Shlita, the Shatnez update about recent findings in clothing in a community and a repaired Taleisim. It's my cover to call on Rabbi Sayagh for tonight's drasha.
It's a tremendous kavod to come again and to speak for Irgun Shiurei Torah, a wonderful organization that is mechazik and is mezaka Yidden with Torah shiurim, which go all over the world. And we're happy to be a part of it, and we give a bracha that should continue to be matzliach, ma'od, ma'od. So we begin I spoke 2 years ago over here approximately, and the shir then was based on the basics of Shatnez. What is Shatnez, and the findings of Shatnez that we find in the clothing, and the findings that we find are Shatnez D'Oraisa, Shatnez D'Rabbanan. Today the focus is what's been happening in the past year or two, which is 3 topics that I will be discussing. Topic number 1 would be Bekeshes, which that also includes jackets which are not made of wool, polyester and viscose jackets, which many of us are under the impression that those type of jackets do not require testing. That will be the first topic that we'll discuss. The second topic we'll discuss is UGGS, which is UGGS is UGGS, which is a brand of shoes and slippers which recently have been found to contain Shatnez. And the third topic that we'll discuss is Taleisim. In the recent years, we're finding a lot of Shatnez in Taleisim. So we would like to discuss what the Shatnez is and how that came about. And then we'll go into other, if there's time, we'll go into other things that we've been finding Shatnez, other interesting findings. So we'll begin. Why do the Chassidish Ha'olam, why do they wear Bekeshes? Why are they makbid to wear these silk garments? It started out as silk, and today it is mostly polyester. It's imitation silk. Why are they wearing these type of garments? So the answer to that is because years ago, especially in Europe, a lot of the garments did contain Shatnez. This reminds me that right after the Second World War, when Mr. Rosenberger was promoting Shatnez here in America, it wasn't something that people were familiar with, and he really wanted that people should keep the mitzvah. So he would talk in the shuls. He would walk into shuls, and between Mincha and Mariv, he would clap on the bima, and he would talk about it. But he didn't get the focus, and it was hard for him to get people's interest. So what he would do, he would clap on the bima, and he says he's ready to give $1,000. And people heard $1,000, so their ears would perk up. And then $1,000 was a lot of money. And why is he ready to give away $1,000? That he bets that if it isn't, that 2 out of 3 people in the Beis Medrash, if they're not wearing Shatnez, then he'll give $1,000. That's how prevalent Shatnez was right after the Second World War. And in Europe, it was even more, because, as I'll explain later why that was, but a lot of the garments had Shatnez. So the Chassidim, there was a group of people that wanted to be Nizher and not Chas v'Sholem be nirshal in the Issa of Shatnez. Therefore, they decided they're not wearing any wool garment or any garment that contains wool that they're going to stay away from. It came to the point where there was a shaila that was sent to the Yismach Moshe, where there was a kpeda in certain shuls that at Bal Tfilah, even if there's people which are not makbid, but there was an extra kpeda that the Bal Tfilah, the chazan shouldn't wear a garment that is made of wool because of the chashash of Shatnez. So they asked him if they should be makbid about such a thing. So he writes, even though it's a beautiful thing, Ashrei, praiseworthy la nizeh ve'ein loivesh bigdei tzemeh. It's a praiseworthy thing for somebody to be careful not to wear garments that contain wool. But he says you can't force the people to do that. So that is why the Bekeshes and the came about. But today, what we found recently, we did find issues with Bekeshes. Over the years we have found, but recently we found that a lot of Bekeshes are using recycled shoulder pads. And other parts which do contain a little bit of linen too. Like over here, I'm holding a Bekesher. I'm going to turn it inside out. This part, what I'm holding up, is the shoulder pad. The shoulder pad is recycled. In addition, it does have a fabric which has white and green threads, and the white threads over here contain linen. So what if it contains linen? And so if the shoulder pad is recycled, the issue is that in the recycling you have a little bit of linen. So what would be the problem? So here I'm going to hold up another fabric, which every Bekesher and Rekel contains this fabric on the inside. This is called a front canvas material. This is what gives body and gives shape to the Bekesher. And in this fabric, there's always wool. Now the question is, what percentages of wool? Some of them have more wool, some of them have less wool. So here, in every Bekesher today, even though it started out as a garment, because it's not a wool-bearing garment, but today they are using materials in the stiffenings, in the reinforcements that do contain wool, and therefore, if there's any linen in there, that could be a problem. Now, this explains also why, if you have a jacket, that the jacket is made of polyester and viscose, which is very common to walk into any of the Jewish stores, and they'll sell you a suit or a jacket or a blazer which is made of polyester and viscose. So they may even tell you that it does not need testing, but that's incorrect, because what we test at the Shatnez laboratories, we test the inner components. And here in this jacket, I'm going to turn this jacket inside out, and again it has this what's called the front canvas material, which is what reinforces the main body of the jacket, and that always has wool. And here in this little boy's jacket, right next to it is another fabric that has in it white threads that are linen. So here you have a wool fabric and a linen fabric sewn together in the inside of this little boy's jacket, which is made of polyester and viscose. Now, I did recently also find in a polyester and viscose jacket sold in one of the Jewish stores in Lakewood. And what was interesting is that it had linen only in one shoulder pad, which means things coming from China today are so inconsistent. Normally, a garment will have a pair of shoulder pads. It means that both shoulder pads within the garment will be the same. Just one is for the right side and one is for the left side. Here in China, they'll have two different shoulder pads. So when it comes to Shatnez testing, we always have to look on both sides and check on both sides. And that's what I recently found, that this particular jacket, only one of the two shoulder pads had linen inside. And of course, there was wool in other parts, which made it Shatnez. The Bekeshes today are also primarily made in China. There's really no hashgacha. So we assume that because it's made for a Jewish company, so that's why they assume that it's okay. And the truth is, if somebody wants to make sure that it's not Shatnez, he should really have it checked. He shouldn't rely on the fact that it was made for Jewish people and therefore it was okay. Okay, so this is the first topic, explaining why non-wool jackets have to be checked for Shatnez. And the second topic that I would like to discuss is really something that's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch before I get to talking about the shoes. But the side of the Shulchan Aruch, it brings a story. This is in Siman Reish Tzadi Tes in Yeridea. On the side of the Shulchan Aruch, there's a Beis Hillel. The Beis Hillel brings a story. Approximately 300 years ago, in Vilna, the Rav was the Chelkas Mechaykek, and the Rav decided to make some inquiries regarding Shatnez. So what was the issue? The issue was, and now I'm explaining why Shatnez was more prevalent in Europe years ago, because today we have a lot of synthetic fibers. Years ago, there wasn't synthetic fibers, it was all natural fibers. And the natural fibers that they were using they weren't using linen, of course, but they claimed that they're using hemp, canvas. So let me show you first what canvas looks like and what linen is. So this is linen. These are dried out stalks of linen. And what I'm holding in my hand over here is canvas, which in English this is a hemp. So now hemp and wool is okay. There is a shita that holds that hemp and wool is Shatnez, and that's a Rabbeinu Ephraim, because the Gemara asks, how do we know that when the Torah says Pishtan is referring to linen? The Gemara asks, how do we know that bad is kisna? Because linen has many different names. It's called bad in the Torah, Beis Daled, or it's called sheish. It has kisna, pishtan. So the Gemara asks, how do we know when the Torah says bad, it's referring to kisna, it's referring to pishtan? So the Gemara answers, because it's davar ha'oile bad bevad. It grows in a singular form. That means every seed produces one stalk. So the Rabbeinu Ephraim asks, the Metzias is, if you go to the fields that are growing linen, you'll see that every seed is producing more than one stalk. Every seed is producing multiple stalks. So therefore he says what pishtan, when the Torah says pishtan, it's referring to hemp, which each seed produces one stalk. So according to the Rabbeinu Ephraim, what is Shatnez? Tzemeh and canvas, wool and canvas. but we don't paskin that way. The Shulchan Aruch says, what is Shatnez? Tzemeh upishtan, and canvas and tzemeh is okay. So the tailors or all the people making clothing in Vilna, they claimed that they weren't using linen thread, they were using hemp thread. So, but how are you supposed to know? This is one of the most difficult tests that we have in the Shatnez laboratories today, is being able to identify the difference between hemp and linen. Because once it's processed, once it's manufactured, under the microscope, it's identical. You put a fiber of hemp and a fiber of linen under the microscope, it looks exactly the same. We do have ways of being able to see the difference, but it's not as simple, it's not as easy. So the Chelkas Mechoykek obviously knew that saying that something is hemp is very likely to be linen. So he decided to call a meeting, and he invited all the tailors, all the people that claimed to know the difference between linen and hemp. He said he even invited Arelim, Goyim to come. Gam hoyu etzleinu Arelim balei melochais shall bigdei pishtan. And he gave them swatches of linen and swatches of hemp, and he asked them to identify them. And he said they all failed the test. Therefore, he instituted that there should be a hashgacha, because since the only way to see the clear difference between linen and hemp is mishas ktsira, when it grows. So if somebody followed the process from when it was harvested until it was actually produced into a thread, and then there's a hersher on it saying that this is pure hemp, only then you could use it. So the Beis Hillel concludes, he says, V'chein hi ro'ui v'nochein. The right thing and the proper thing to do is limnais memunim al zeh, to appoint people, shlei liknais mishum adam, that you shouldn't buy from any person. You can't just go into a store and buy a spool of thread. Im loy sheyilek ksav hersha, unless there'll be a ksav hersha, me'eze adam neman kosher. There has to be not only stam ksav hersha, hersha is not enough. You have to know that the hersha is being given by a trustworthy person. Shehoyo eitzel amlocha b'shas asiyas habeged. Okay, so he says two things: you need a hersha, and that the hersha should be from an Adam Naaman. So today, we know in the hashgacha industries, you can have a hashgacha, but it doesn't mean it's a good hashgacha. You have to find out who is the mashgiach, who's behind it, and only if it's trustworthy and reliable, then you can rely on it. And it's the same thing in the Shatnez industry too. You have to know who's the person testing, who's the person behind it. Baruch Hashem, myself and the people that I've trained, we're under the hashgacha with Meshulam Polachik, who's a big Dayan and Rav in Williamsburg. And he's on top of everything that we do, making sure we do everything properly and correctly. Okay. So now let's talk about the UGGS, the shoes, and what is UGGS and what is the specialty about the UGGS is that they use sheepskin. That's what they're known for. So I'll show you an example. Here's an UGG slipper, and you see the fur that you see over here, that's sheepskin. So this is a company that's known for using sheepskin in their products. So now, the question is, we found Shatnez in these slippers. For example, this slipper that I'm holding here, you can see on the outside is a fabric, and the blue threads going across are linen, and here you have sheepskin, which is wool. So l'chayra, that should be Shatnez. But others argue and say that this is not Shatnez. So let's try to understand what the argument is, and let's see what the halacha is in regarding to this slipper. So in order to understand that, we'll review a little bit. The word Shatnez makes three words, which is the words shua, tavi, and nuz, which is the processing of threads. So the translation of the word shua means combing, tavi is spinning, and nuz is weaving. There's another explanation to nuz, which means plying. So let me demonstrate the combing and the spinning process. So here, what I have in my hand is a wooden comb that has metal teeth. My other hand, I have here a lock of wool. And in order to create a thread from this lock of wool, what has to be done, the wool has to be combed. So here I've taken this lock of hair, I've attached it to the metal teeth of this comb, and then with a second comb, we're going to actually comb it. So the Torah is telling us, in order to create Shatnez, the wool has to have gone through the three steps. Shua, Tavi, and Nuz. Shua is the combing. If wool hasn't been combed, then it cannot become something that's asa. That's number one. So here we've combed the wool. After you comb the wool, the middle letter of the word Shatnez is, the middle letter is Tes, which stands for Tavi. So here I'm going to take this tongue of wool that we just combed, that we just did shua to, and then I'm going to take this spindle. Spindle is a stick which has a weight on the bottom, a hook on top, which this is called a plach. In Eishes Chayil, every Friday night we sing the Chapeha Tamcha Falech. The Eishes Chayil is Dorshot Tzemer Upishtim. She makes sure that the clothing, the materials, the threads used in the home are not Shatnez. The Chapeha Tamcha Falech, the Pasuk says, with her hand she holds a plach. This is called a plach. See, I'm going to take this spindle, I'm going to attach this tongue of wool to this hook, to the hook on top, and gravity is going to make it fall downwards, and as it falls downwards, it twists and ties all the fibers, all the hairs, and creates a yarn. So this is Tavi, which is the middle letter of the word Shatnez. And then Nuz is taking all these threads and weaving them and creating a fabric. So in order to create Shatnez D'Oraisa, this has to be done to the wool, then it has to be done to the linen. Yachtav, you combine the two together, you've created Shatnez D'Oraisa. So now getting back to the UGGS. So the claim number one was that this is sheepskin, which means it wasn't combed. Here they took the raw wool straight off the sheep's back and they put it into this slipper. So since the wool wasn't combed, so therefore it cannot become something that is a davar osa. We said in order to create Shatnez, the wool has to be combed. It's not just the use of wool and linen together. That's not what creates Shatnez. What creates Shatnez is combed wool. And this obviously is not combed, this is sheepskin. So this was the claim that why the UGGS shouldn't be a problem of Shatnez. And this particular boot I even had to take away from somebody because they were insisting on wearing it because they said it's sheepskin. And sheepskin is not a problem of Shatnez. And to add to that, is because the Shulchan Aruch actually says in Siman Reish Sadi Tes Sif Aleph, Oireis hakvasim, sheepskin, she'oisim mehem malbushim, that they make garments out of them, mutter latafran bechute pishton, you're allowed to sew them with linen thread. Ve'ein chosheshin lenimai shel tzemah, we're not worried about the wool fibers. So, firstly, this was the claim. The claim was that it's raw wool, which has never been combed. And claim number two, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Sadi Tes, Sif Aleph, says that sheepskin is allowed to be sewn with linen. So therefore they said, there's no problem with Uggs. All these shoes, all these sneakers, whatever it is, are all no problem at all. Now, so what is the truth of the matter? So, there's two types of Uggs. You have the natural looking Uggs, which do not look like this. Those are the ones which are found in Alaska, which you have these boots, which you have this, you have actually locks of hair hanging down, which is actually raw wool. Those are real sheepskin. But real sheepskin is going to look something like this. You're going to see locks of hair. Here, looking at all these Ugg products that we see, all the hairs are equal length. So this is imitations. These are really imitation sheepskin. What they do is that the wool has been shorn and then reattached. That means the sheep was shorn, and then it was cut to staple. It was cut to a specific length, and then it was attached to a fabric, and then it was attached to the shoe. So, whenever you see that all the fibers of this are all the same length, those are all imitation. So really, this was combed wool, shorn and combed. And then the Shatnez that we found was that in between the outer layer where there was the suede of the leather and the wool, there was a canvas, there was a stiff material that contained linen. So these are really all imitations, and we actually found linen in between. Now, some of them are actual, they're still attached to the leather. It means there's something in between. They're not the ones that look like, they're not actual sheepskin, but they're halfway processed. They are leather, they still come attached to the leather, but it looks similar to this. So even those will be a problem, because here, there's a tshuva from Rabbi Chaskel Roth, which what he's discussing is Russian hats. And he's discussing a type of Russian hats that were made from, they're called kuchmas. It says, Be'inyan koiva harosh hanikra kuchma, which there were also sheepskin. This happens to be rabbit fur, but the ones that are made of sheepskin, and he's discussing if that's a problem of Shatnez or not. So what he comes out with is as follows. He brings the Taz, where the Taz explains the Mechaber. The Mechaber is saying, you have oiros hakvasim, you have sheepskin, muter latafon b'chutei pishtan, you're allowed to sew them with linen thread, ve'ein chosheshin lenimai shel tzemeh, and we're not worried about the wool fibers. So why are we not worried about the wool fibers? So the Taz explains, because in Shatnez there's an inyan of bittul. Now let me explain that. What that means is, If you only have wool and linen by itself, that's all you have, wool and linen, then there's no bittul. Because that is the mixture which the Torah said is asa. And it doesn't make a difference what the percentages are. If you have 99% wool and 1% linen, that's already Shatnez. And the Taz speaks out, it's not similar, leidomi lebasa b'chalav, it's not similar to basa b'chalav, because basa b'chalav is tam asra Torah. The Torah says lo sevashel, which therefore, if that's why there's an inyan of bittul b'shishim by basa b'chalav, because once it's 60 times as more, then the taste, you don't taste it anymore, so therefore it's okay. But by Shatnez, it doesn't say lo sevashel, it just says lo silbash, you're not allowed to wear wool and linen. So it doesn't make a difference what the percentages is. If it's 99% wool, 1% linen, you are still wearing a garment that has a mixture of wool and linen. But the Shulchan Aruch says, Mi shenis arav leitzeme in pishan, if somebody happened that wool and linen got mixed together, so there's an eitzah. You don't have to throw it out. Maybe min acha, you bring a different min. Uma'arvay imoim, and you mix it together with them. Umevatal echod mehem, and you mevatal one of them. That means, let's say, you have 20% linen and 80% wool. So what do? You bring cotton, for example, and the cotton is 30%. You bring 30% cotton, you mix it into this mixture. So what will happen now is the cotton will be mevatel the linen, because the cotton is more than the linen, and therefore, even though you have now a mixture of wool, cotton, and linen, then it'll be okay. So that's the din. You bring a min shlishi, you bring a third min, you mix it in over here, and therefore it's okay. So now getting back to explaining why by sheepskin, which is sewn with linen thread, is okay. So the Taz explains because you have a min shlishi, because you have three things over here. You have the wool fibers, you have the linen thread, and you have the leather. The leather is the min shlishi over here. So the leather will be mevatel the wool fibers that are getting mixed in over here. So now comes the chiddush of Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, the Taz is saying that the few wool fibers that get mixed in will become bottle. But if we're talking about such a type of a garment, or such a type of a garment which has so much wool fibers attached to it, a very thick layer of wool fibers, so that you can't say that these wool fibers are going to be bottled to the leather. You can only say that the wool fibers are bottled to the leather when it's the skins. What the Shulchan Aruch is talking about is that all that wool was removed. The wool was shorn. You were just basically left with the leather, with a few wool fibers still left attached. So those few fibers of wool that's still attached, since it's so few, that could become bottled to the leather. But when the wool is much more than the leather, as you can see over here, the wool is much more, so therefore you don't say that these wool fibers will become bottled. So the whole din of Eiris Kevosim is only talking about where it's basically leather, which was shorn, and then you have a few fibers still attached. But when you have a thick layer of wool, that wasn't what the Shulchan Aruch was talking about. So, Bekitzer, the question was that the Uggs should be mutter because it's Oires Kevosim, it's sheepskin, and in addition, it wasn't combed, it wasn't shua, wasn't even done to it. So the answer is that most of them that we see today are imitation, that the wool was actually combed and reattached. And even if it wasn't reattached, it's the real leather which still has the wool on it. But since the wool is a thick layer, so that the Emek HaTshuvah, Chaskel says, that's not the heter of the Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Ugg company, they produce over 800 different types of styles, and they always keep coming out with new ones. And we did find the issues that was found, whether either it's on the fabric on the outside, like I showed you here, his has linen threads on the outside. In this boot over here, the tape that's going around the sole of this boot is linen. So you have linen and wool. And the other problem that we found was that in between the leather or the outer fabric and the layer of wool, in between there was a canvas that either was a linen blend or it was pure linen. And some of them we actually found that it was a pure linen canvas that they put on the inside. So talking about shoes, recently we have found a lot of shoes with issues. Here's a Dr. Scholl's ladies' shoe. Really, this came from a woman living in Cherry Hill that she had it in the closet a few months. She was waiting to be able to get it tested for Shatnez until she got a chance to send it to Lakewood. She sent it to my laboratory because it had wool on the outside, but the lining on the inside is linen. This was a student of my wife that was wearing this in school, and she wanted to know if this particular shoe had an issue with Shatnez. So Baruch Hashem, my wife told her to take it off right away, and when we brought it home to have it tested, it turned out that the black is wool and all the colorful threads are linen. It's wool and linen. The company name over here just says MSGM. So today they're using fabrics in whether it's children's shoes, in ladies' shoes. Of course, if it's a pure leather or vinyl, that's not an issue. It's only if they're using fabrics on the outside, then it's like everything else, then it should be checked. Now, just to give you a rule of when you should be chayshish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some wool and linen, actually mix it together and make a thread out of it, and then you'll know what type of threads are problematic or what type of fabrics are problematic. Now there's no issa to make Shatnez. The issa is only levisha Shatnez. The Shulchan Aruch says is in Siman Dalet Shin, which is the last seat in Hilchos Shatnez, the Shulchan Aruch says, Klei begodim muter la'aseisam u'lekaimam. You're allowed to make them, you're allowed to own them. Ve'enam asurim ela belevisha. The is is only loy silvash. Unlike basa b'chola, where there's an is of loy silvasha. So here I'm going to take some wool and linen, some wool and some linen. We're going to mix the two together. We're going to create a thread made of these two components. Okay. So first we're going to comb it, and then we're going to spin it. See, here I'm combing wool and linen together. Now I'm going to spin from this mixture, I'm going to spin a thread that's made of wool and linen. Now, when we spun wool by itself before, that created a nice even yarn. However, when you spin wool and linen together, it doesn't make such a fine thread. As you see what's happening, because of the linen mixed into the thread, it makes an uneven yarn. That's when you spin something that's hard together with something that's soft, it makes a thread that has uneven parts to it, has enlarged areas within the thread, and that's because of the linen that's mixed into it over here. Now, if you would imagine, if you take many of these threads and you weave a garment out of it, so I'll show you what such a garment will look like. So here's an H&M pants that's made of linen and wool. So as you see over here, it's blue and has the white going in and out. And this is what a typical wool and linen fabric will look like. The reason why you see the white going in and out is because what's happening is each thread is a mixture of blue and white, and where there's more of the white, that's why it appears, you see it more, and then eventually the whole fabric has this appearance. Here's another jacket, which also says wool and linen on the label. It's a Michael Kors, and it says wool and linen on the label. So if you look closely at this fabric, you also see it's irregular. It has little white pieces all over the fabric. Here's an Ann Taylor sweater that also says wool and linen on the label. So any appearance of such way, it looks like it's a mixture where threads are going in and out, colors are fading in and out. Those should raise a red flag. Maybe those fabrics are wool and linen. Here's a Theory sweater, which also says on the label wool and linen. So this gives you an idea what type of fabric should raise a red flag. So therefore, if you have a shoe which has this type of a fabric, a tweed fabric, multicolored, threads of uneven thicknesses, those are garments that you should be chayshish, and you should be worried that maybe they're Shatnez. Here's a little Zara girl skirt, which also has wool and linen in the fabric. So whenever you see these tweed fabrics, these multicolored fabrics, this is what you should be aware of. Okay. This Zara doesn't list wool and linen. This Zara, it did list wool, but it lists other fibers. So when a garment lists other fibers, that also raises a red flag. Okay, now let's talk about the Taleisim. It's interesting that Taleisim have been an issue in the last couple of years. It started out first a few years ago where we had a big issue with the Turkish Taleisim. And the Turkish Taleisim also was like the Bekeshes. The reason why they were using Turkish Taleisim, because in Turkey, it was really Tunisia, but it was called Turkey. Maybe Tunisia was a part of the Ottoman Empire, but where the actual wool came from was from Tunis. And they were getting wool from Tunisia, from Turkey, because in that country there was no growth of any linen. So in order for the Zahiras of the Shatnez, they were makpid to wear a Turkish talis, means wool made from wool that came from Turkey, which had no chashash of shat, no chashash of any linen blended into it. And then what happened was, our tester in Kiryas Yoel in Monroe noticed that these Turkish Taleisim were sort of recycled. It wasn't a pure wool. It didn't have a pure look to it. it looked as if something was mixed within the fabric. So he contacted the Rabbanim of New Square, and he brought it to their attention. So right away they established that they're going to, every time a new batch of Taleisim come in, they're going to send him one or two as a sample that he should check them. And it didn't take long. A few months after that, it started Sukkot time. But Hanukkah time approximately, we found Taleisim that, like, within the fabric itself, there was entire threads of linen running through the entire fabric. So that created a major commotion. We spent many days in different shuls in the tri-state area checking people's Taleisim, and many Taleisim were found to contain Shatnez. And now, there's still Taleisim that are being produced in Tunisia today, but most of the Turkish Taleisim now are produced in Eretz Yisrael. And Baruch Hashem, those have a good hashgacha, and those are fine. Then, 2 years ago, approximately, a new issue came up with Taleisim, that it was being repaired, it was being fixed with linen threads, with linen fabrics. There was a shiur that was given in Har Nof by a friend of mine, and he mentioned that if you have any alterations done, especially if a fabric was added, then it's something that you should have checked. Because if you walk into a cleaner's and all they did was they sewed a button on, you don't have to be worried about that, because today they don't use linen thread. Linen thread is not found today. Why is that? Because today linen, most of the threads that are being used are spools of thread that can fit onto a sewing machine. Today, the sewing machines that we have cannot use linen thread. If they use linen thread, it's going to block up all the needles. So the use of linen threads cannot be used on our sewing machines that we have today. So therefore, they're only using poly-rayon or polycotton or cotton threads. And when they need to do hand stitching, they will use those threads too. So we're not finding the use of linen thread today in the garments, and we don't have to be worried that the cleaners use linen thread. But if they would add a piece of material to patch something, then we have to be worried maybe they used a piece of linen onto a wool garment or vice versa. And this is what we found, that after the shiur in Har Nof, this person came over and he said he flies to America frequently, and when he does that, he had a bunch of Taleisim and he had them fixed, and he wanted his talis checked. And this was the actual talis, and then we found that this cleaners had used a piece of linen to fix his talis. And then he brought other Taleisim. See, this had a hole in it, and they fixed it with a linen fabric. And it was nispara that for the last 10 years, this person had been wearing Shatnez. So really, this was a problem going back 10 years. And we even found we went into the cleaners in Borough Park that was doing it, and we took away a lot of the linen fabrics that they had in the store, but hopefully that they stopped doing it. But then after that, we found that there was other cleaners in Borough Park that were also using linen fabrics to fix Taleisim. We must have found it in at least 4 cleaners. So this was one issue. Now, a few weeks ago, we found another issue with Taleisim. And this issue, this is a company that produces linen kittles also. So they produce 2 things. They produce Taleisim and linen kittlach. So being that they're producing linen kittlach, and what they're makpid to use for linen kittlach is to sew it with linen thread. So in this company, they have linen thread. See, here they were doing alterations to Taleisim, And the alterations that they were doing to the talis was they had two sizes. They had a large and a medium. They didn't want to buy large. They had a large and a small. They didn't want to import large, medium, and small. So what they were doing is that if they got an order of medium taleisim, they would alter the large taleisim. But then it would mean they would have to make new holes. So the hole, they had the seamstress that was sewing it, and she took the thread that was available, which was linen thread, and she was using the linen thread to make the hole. And this was just discovered a few weeks ago. So who knows how many of those taleisim are circulating in our midst. So I don't know why, it's just in the last couple of years, taleisim is something that we would never think of would have an issue of Shatnez, and here we're finding such interesting issues with taleisim. So the answer is because the word Shatnez makes the word Satan as, and Satan as means that the Satan stellt sich very stark on Shatnez. Why is that? Because he knows that kol rega v'rega, every moment of wearing a garment that is Shatnez is a problem. And he knows that the tefillas are not niskabel. If one was wearing Shatnez, even if he was b'shegeg, it's like a metzias. A person wears a garment that is Shatnez, that creates a mechitza. The Rikanti says it creates a mechitza and doesn't allow the tefillas to go up. And also, the Lashon of the Heshiv Moshe, the Lashon of the Yismach Moshe, he writes, what it does is, it makes the word Satan as, at shekoyach ha-Satan hu az, v'chozak ma'oid matuach ala leifshay, which means the Satan has a power over the person that's wearing it to convince him and make him do whatever he wants. So the Satan knows that, and therefore he pushes it in. He gets it into our clothing, even into the taleisim, where it's something that we wouldn't even dream of, but he was able to get it in because he knows the chayma ha'issa. So now let me show you some other recent findings which is shocking. Now we spoke about recycling. Recycling is, what they do is they shred materials, and from that shreddings they create either the basic recycling is as such. Here they'll shred fabrics and all types of materials into fiber thread form, and then they'll use it as fillings in all types of things. As here you can buy a throw pillow in a department store, only to find out that it's all filled with this recycled mix. Now in this mix, it's very likely that there's wool and linen in it. So this is something that you should definitely stay away from. Okay, so there's an issa to sit on Shatnez. That's an issa d'Rabbanan. And there's also an issa to hold it against your chest. Or even to sleep on it is also a problem. So this is a basic recycling, or sometimes you'll find it in the linings of coats. Here's a coat lining, and this coat lining is padded with a recycled mixture. So this is something that you could all see. We even find it in oven mitts. An oven mitt, you can turn it inside out, as I'm doing right now. And you can see that it's filled with recycled threads and fibers, which this is something one should avoid. And here is even work gloves, which is $6. You buy a pack of 3. and only one of the three on the inside had this recycled mix. So, whenever you have this type of a mixture, it's something they should stay away from. You shouldn't use it. Now what? This would be Issa D'Rabbanan, because this is fibers pressed together, so this would be a form of shua. And what they've done now is sometimes what they do is they take this mix of threads and fibers and they'll spin from that mixture, they'll spin threads. And then they will use it in what's called pipings. So here you have a pillowcase which has a piping that has a cording that goes around the entire pillowcase. And here on the inside, it has these colorful threads, which are this recycled mix. And this particular one I tested, and this has wool and linen inside. And then I even found it on a towel. Now towels, I never thought that have Shatnez. And people ask me if towels need to be tested. I always say no. But here there's a towel that has this piping on it. And in this cord, you have this recycled mix, which has in it wool and linen. And that's the Sif in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, matpechois shemekanchim bohem es hayadayim. Towels that are used to wipe your hands, asurim mishum kelayim, are not allowed to be Shatnez. So there's always something new. There's always a new twist. So we would like to end with a special bracha from the Kamana, where the Kamana he wrote a Chumash Hechel HaBracha. He also wrote a parish on the Mishnayos called Pnei Zakan. And at the end of his parish in Kalayim, which the last parak in Kalayim is the parak that talks about Shatnez, so he's Messiah over there, Hazor b'Kalayim, one who's careful not to wear Shatnez, Yarech Yomim ba'olam hazeh ba'olam habo, will have an arichas Yomim in this world and in Olam habo, v'lo yovay oid beGilgal, and he won't need to come back again. V'yanuach b'sholem al mishkavay ba'er hachayim, and he will rest peacefully. There's the Yalkut Mamleis, who his yahrzeit was today. Rabbi Yaakov Kuli, so he brings a story that there was this tailor that unfortunately in his lifetime was marshal many people with the Issa of Shatnez. In the clothing that he made, he wasn't so careful to make sure not to use linen thread. So his entire life he was making clothing that were wool and linen. So when he passed away, they buried him. And the next day, they found him outside of his cave. And then they buried him again. And the next day came out again. And the Rav did a Shailas Chalaim to find out why this was happening. And in the Shailas Chalaim, he was told that since he was marshal people with the Issa of Shatnez, so therefore the earth is not going to cover him. So the Rav davened that he should get his einish in Yenevelt, and then he stayed covered. But that's what the command is saying, V'yanuach b'sholem al mishkavay. And here it says, V'yoylid bonim tzadikim chayim v'kayomim. A person, by being careful not to wear Shatnez, will be zeicher to bonim tzadikim chayim v'kayomim, healthy children, elecha children. Moshe Neishlos, who was a big dayan in New Square, said over that his father was zeicher to have him as a son is because his father had a nisayon in Shatnez and he was niskaber, and because of that he was zeicher that he got a son of such a Talmid Chacham. And it says v'yizke gam ba'olam hazeh l'kol tuv. Even in this world, the person is zeicher l'chol tuv. Even though we know schar mitzvos b'hai al meleka, we do not get schar for mitzvos in this world. But the Psalms say that is for mitzvahs aseh. For mitzvah loisa aseh, a person does get peris in this world. It's in the schus of learning about the mitzvah, keeping the mitzvah, all our tefillah should be niskabel, which the taka be zeicher to see Grace Yeshua's, zeicher to see the Mashiach and the Bnei Beis HaMikdash B'Karab.
Shem Irgin Shir Torah, Moses Boston, like Rabbi Yosef Sayagh, Rabbi Sayagh, a very informative shir. Please let us remind the other once again, and anyone who's listening and watching, tomorrow night is Irgin Shir Torah's annual dinner, Torah event of the year. Come and help support Irgin Shir Torah's Habatz's Torah D'Rabim worldwide throughout the year. There's a elegant buffet sponsored by classic caterers, dramatic presentation of Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita, questions and answers, and Havla Mechaim Chaim the Kal Rebbe Zatzal. Due to space limitations, the event is for men only. And unlike Shatnez, where there's a service of Dava Osar, Dava Mutter, but the dinner will only be all Dvarim Mutarim and Choshev Yidden being Mishtatef. Please be one of them. It's also a great opportunity to win an Art Scroll Shas, raffle tickets, $100 for one ticket, and so on. Call Irgin Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or 718-853-3950 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com for this great schus of Habatz's Torah D'Rabim. Shekar to everyone for coming. Chananya ben Akashem, Marat Sagedesh Baruch Hu L'Zakes Yisrael Afika Hebron Torah Mitzvah Shenem Adonai Chofetz Eman Tzidke Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.